Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar presentation, How to Improve Your DevOps Practices and Culture, brought to you by Logi Analytics. I would like to introduce you to our presenter. Ben Linders is an independent consultant in Agile, Lean, Quality, and Continuous Improvement. As an advisor, trainer, and coach, he helps organizations with effectively deploying software development and management practices. He focuses on continuous improvement, collaboration and communication, and professional development to deliver business value to customers. Ben is an active member of networks on Agile, Lean, Kanban, and Quality. He shares his experiences in a bilingual blog as an editor for InfoQ and as a practitioner in communities like Computable, Quora, DZone, Stack Overflow, and TechTarget.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much first to DZone and to Logi Analytics for making it possible for me to do this webinar. What I'm going to be sharing in this webinar is basically two things. We're going to be looking at DevOps practices and DevOps culture just to see what's it all about, what makes DevOps differently, what are the challenging parts of DevOps, and how can we deal with them. And the second part is going to be focusing on continuous improvement, and then looking at how to apply all the stuff which is there in the continuous improvement world, all the practices, all the good stuff which is there, all the ideas towards DevOps. The devil is going to be in the details in this presentation, so you might hear a lot of stuff which you're already familiar with, but the devil is really in how you apply that kind of stuff in your organization. I'm going to give a lot of examples from organizations that I've worked with, how we use DevOps or how we use similar practices in organizations, how we manage to improve them, to give you some idea on how to improve stuff in your organization, and how to make sure that you're getting maximum benefit out of DevOps or of any other HR practices that you're currently using in your organization. This is also the reason that we have the Q&A part. So if there's any question along the way, like, okay, how would I do this in my organization, how to apply it within certain circumstances, within certain limitations, that will be a great question to ask. And note down your question, and we're going to take it at the end of the webinar. Okay, a little bit about me. The most important stuff right now is that I'm more or less going through my own digital agile transformation. I'm making more and more of the stuff that I'm doing in my workshops, that I'm doing when I'm working with organizations, when I'm working with teams or with management organizations, making the stuff available as digital downloads on my website. It started with the books which are listed below, and the fourth book, What Problem, is actually a book that I'm still working on. But I'm sharing more and more of the games, exercises, coaching cards, and all that kind of stuff on my website for people to download and to use it in their own organization. This is my way of helping the software development world to become a better place. And if we talk about software development and we talk about DevOps, then I think it's good to go back to the roots of Agile. And the roots of where Agile was coined and defined is, of course, the Agile Manifesto, the Manifesto for Agile software development. And I pulled up the opening statement of this Agile Manifesto. We are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. And there's two things which stand out for me in this sentence. The first thing is uncovering better ways, which basically tells you that if you look at Agile software development, and I think it also applies to DevOps, you're always trying to find better ways to do stuff. You're never done. This is not a recipe. This is not a process that you can implement in your organization and then you know how to do it and then you're done. This is going to be a journey of continuous improvement, a journey of seeing how you're performing, but also a journey of adjusting to change in your organization and outside your organization. And you're always going to be looking for a way to become better. And I think that's also the case with DevOps. That's why I'm going to dive into those improvement practices. The other part of this sentence is doing it and helping others do it. And this is really the practitioner part of the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto was not written by process people, was not written by quality people, it was written by developers. It was written by people who were writing software and who were finding better ways to do it, better ways to improve their own work, which means that they're basically doing the stuff and they're helping others to improve in there. And I think the same is also a valid approach if you look at how you want to apply DevOps in your organization. You're going to be an example of those practices. You're going to be using them yourself, and you're also going to be helping people in your organization to find better ways to do it, better ways to work with those agile practices. Another part on if you look at DevOps and DevOps improvement is something that I took from the State of DevOps report, the 2019 edition, which also clearly states that if you look at DevOps, their suggestion is start with the foundation, start with the basic stuff in there, and then adopt a continuous improvement mindset. And their suggestion is look at what's your constraint, what is the main stuff that's blocking you right now to get the best results out of DevOps or set of constraints, and work on those constraints to get them out of the way. Make sure that those constraints are no longer limiting your organization, no longer limiting your teams in your organization to get results and to get software delivered. Once those constraints are out of the way, they say repeat the process. So you're going to be looking on what's the biggest constraint right now? What's the stuff that's blocking me right now in my organization to really deliver value? And how can I get that blockage, that constraint out of the way? So again, this is a journey of continuous improvement where you start with the foundations and then keep on improving and keep on finding better ways to do stuff in your organization. Okay, right now I want to check with the audience to see what's the most important area in there, what's the most important question in there. And I would like to hear from the people in the audience, what aspect of DevOps, based on counts, I use count as to divide it up, is providing you with the biggest challenges in your company when it looks to adopting DevOps or adopting a DevOps practices. Would it be aspect of culture change? Would it have to do with the automation aspect of DevOps? Would it be the lean part which is in DevOps? Would it be measurements that you're using to see how well you're performing? Or is it the sharing part, the openness in your organization that is posing you with the biggest challenges? So I'd like to see your votes right now.
Okay, so 92% of attendees voted, and there is a tie between culture and automation at 42%. And then lean and sharing have 0%, and then at measurement, there is 17%.
Okay, thank you for these votes. So the biggest challenges appear to be in the culture part and in the automation part. And I think those two are indeed very, very challenging parts of DevOps. Where you look at the lean part, that's much more experience, of course, with lean, which goes back to the previous century already, where organizations were working with lean and using lean also to improve practices in their organization. I think the measurement part will also remain a challenging one, as it shows with the 17% in there. I'm going to dive into all the areas and let's see what the biggest challenges are in there. So if you look at culture right now, what I think the biggest challenges in there is if you want to get culture change going in your organization, then a lot of the traditional approaches for organizational change will not work if you want to adapt something like DevOps, which is based on the Agile principles in there. The main idea behind DevOps is that you want to get into self-organizing teams, a self-organizing organization as much as possible. You want to put responsibility as low in the organization as possible. And this is actually in conflict with a lot of the change methodologies which were developed in the previous century. I think the basic statement is that imposing any framework, whether that would be DevOps or Agile or any other framework, imposing stuff on people doesn't work. And this is still the approach that I see a lot when we're looking at adopting DevOps in the organization. People are trained in DevOps practices, they're being told on how to work in a DevOps way, how to use certain tools, and then even which tools they should be using. And that's going to give you a lot of resistance. That's going to give you a lot of people who are not happy with being pushed into this kind of situation. And basically, it's incongruent with the agile way of working. So my suggestion, if you look at culture change in the organization, is make sure that people are voluntarily participating in the DevOps stuff, joining in because they think it's important, joining in because they think that it makes sense for them, and make sure that it's really a collaboration, that people are really working together. And I think that's even more important for DevOps than for a lot of the other agile practices there. Because if you want DevOps to work, you're going to need collaboration throughout the whole delivery chain to make sure that you're getting the results out of there. Instead of pushing stuff on people, go to a pull approach and make sure that people can pull in things that make sense for them that they can use in there. And if people are resisting to stuff, start listening to them and take their concerns seriously instead of imposing more stuff on them and telling them how to do their work. I think this is the main things to focus upon if you want to get into a culture that really supports a DevOps way of working in your organization. And to give you an example in that, there was an organization where I was working with, and they actually had their business team on one location, and the development team and the people involved in the operation were based on another location. And when I got in touch with them, the first thing they noticed was that actually the business team was much more agile than the development operation people were. The business team had a clear backlog, had clear priorities on what they would like to see developed in their product, and also knew how to prioritize stuff and how to work with that. Finding out that when they were talking with the devs and the ops parts of their organization based on another location, the answer they usually got back was just tell us what you want us to do in the next 2 months and then we're going to do that. Instead of taking an agile approach, like tell us what's the most important stuff right now and we start working on that. And I found that there was quite a big distance between those two parts in the organization. Not just a physical distance, but also a social distance. Physically, they were about 100 kilometers apart, and that was something that was pretty easy to cover with travel, so that shouldn't be a big problem if you look distance wise. But from a social point, we didn't really know each other, and that actually created a lot of distance between the people and was really blocking the collaboration in there. So one of the first things that I started doing with them is to find a way to make the whole software development process and the whole product that they were developing as transparent as possible. And the first step in there was to create one backlog, which might sound like a no-brainer, but actually in the organization, they had backlog management at the business side, but once they got into development, they had their own backlogs, which were separated out from the business people, which actually weren't even visible, where they managed their own stuff. So the step towards one backlog was a big step to make things visible already. One of the other things that helped us to bridge the gap between development and operation was a timeline retrospective that we did on a product release. And we actually did a very detailed timeline retrospective, a total period of about 6 hours, preparing for this release, putting the actual release to work, looking at how the release was working out with the operation people, looking at the people who were using the system, seeing if there were any problems in there or not, deciding on whether or not a rollback was needed. We actually went through this whole cycle of 6 hours where they had quite some issues in there with the timeline retrospectives, also looking at how people felt at certain times during this process about how things were going in there. And we used that both to improve the process, but also to improve the relationship between the different people involved in this. Another thing we did was alternating locations for all meetings. When I got there, basically all the traveling was always going from one side to the other side. And I actually asked them the question if the distance from A to B would be the same as the distance from B to A. And they looked a bit silly to me. But when I explained, like, okay, but you're always traveling from A to B, and you're never traveling from B to A. People from your side B are never traveling to the side A. So there seems to be some problem in there why you're only traveling in one direction. It doesn't sound equal. It doesn't sound really collaborative. So that was the kind of stuff that we were working on with that organization. Summing up, a lot of exercises that I used with them helped them to really get to know each other, to find out how things were working on one side and in the other side, and to find better ways to collaborate based on transparency by working together using one backlog in there. That really made a big difference. Okay, let's go on then the next step on DevOps. If you look at the columns, which is automation. And I can assume that automation can bring a lot of challenges. If you look at all the stuff that you want to do in there, like having continuous integration working, making sure you got automated testing and turning that into continuous testing, making sure that you can deploy as fast as possible, roll back if needed, monitoring how the system is being used. And I think the key thing to make these kind of practices work would be to also have some kind of continuous improvement on top of all these layers in there. And what I see with a lot of organizations that look into the automation part of DevOps is that they're more or less still treating it as a change project where they set out a requirement from the start, select the tools that they think will solve this problem, and then start implementing these tools to find out that the tools aren't working in the way that they were expected to do, but also the people were having a lot of problem with using these tools in their organization. So what would be the solution for that? Basically, first, make sure that any adoption of DevOps is a journey, and you want to know where you are right now. You want to know how you're doing right now before you start changing in there. Nobody starts from a blank plate. Most organizations are adopting DevOps, are already doing software development, they are already releasing products. So you're going to be changing the current way of working, and you need to know your starting point. You need to know how you're doing right now. And this is where self-assessments can help you to look at how you're doing the practices right now in your organization. So assess how you are doing those practices. Find out how well you are doing them. Look at what are the practices that you would like to change in your organization that would help you to improve. Experiment with those practices, be it new practices or be it changes to the way you're currently doing those practices. And look at the impact that this is having in your organization and the outcomes that you want to work towards. Is this really helping you to do a better job? Based on that, learn and adapt. Learn on how things are going and adapt your way of working. This is going to be a cycle where you're going to be going around continuously. If you look at the automation, my advice always to organizations is before you start automating something, first make sure that you know how your process is working and that you understand the stuff that you're doing manually right now, and then start automating it. It doesn't make sense to throw in a fully automated process if you don't know how you're doing those steps manually right now. What is your current way of working and how that current way of working is working out. And I think the same as with any change in organization, but also true for your tools, make it as transparent and make it as easy as possible. Don't try to make something very difficult. Difficult tools, make it as easy as possible so that people know how to use these tools and how to use them in their daily work. A lot of the tools that are there in the DevOps world are generating data and are making data available about the process or about the product. And I think there's still not enough organizations that really use those data as a way to see how they are performing and use it to improve in there. The data is there and they can tell you a lot about what's happening in your organization. And you're getting the data for free basically. So use that data to find ways to improve. And if you start improving, always put your people first. So you might have different tools where you think one tool would be a stronger tool, would be a more valuable tool, would maybe have better features. But check with the people in your organization to see what would be their preference, how that tool would help them in their daily work. And if there's a better fit between a certain tool and people, that probably also a tool to select if you want to start automating stuff in your organization. Okay, lean was added to comms, and I think for a very good reason, because basically what lean adds is the end-to-end feel. Lean helps you to look from the start, from stuff coming into your organization, requests coming into your organization, requirements coming in, until the point in time that you are actually delivered the software to your users and that your users are able to use it. That's where the operation part comes in. And I think Lean tells us also something about dealing with problems. Basically, if you look at software development organization, you're dealing with a lot of complex problems, maybe even systemic problems that are hidden in your organization. And it's going to be difficult to really understand those problems because there's no clear cause effect. Actually, there are going to be some unknowns, so you don't know what to expect in there. So uh, before you can do anything in your organization, you need to invest time into analyzing the problems that you have, taking different views in there which might be relevant in your organization, whether that's a project view or a product view or maybe a system view in there. Most organizations, there are going to be barriers in there, be it cultural barriers, be it organizational barriers, silos in your organization. And you're going to be able to deal with that if you want to do improvement in your organization. So that's also something which is very important to look at the way that decisions are taken in your organization. How is the power distributed? What kind of politics are there? This is stuff that you need to deal with if you want to really make DevOps work well in your organization. Looking at Lean, I think what can be very helpful is to look at Lean software development, which has been explored by Mary Poppendick and Tom Buckley, one of the books, The Lean Mindset. And it goes back to the main principles in there in Lean that can help you to do a better job in there. Those main principles are listed here. And let's pull out some of the principles in there. I think reduce friction can be a very important part if you look at DevOps again. Look at what is making it difficult for people to do their work. What is making it difficult for people to prepare software for release or to release software to your customers, to really deploy software in there. And find out what those difficulties are and how you can reduce those difficulties, making it easier for people to get software out there into the hands of the users. I think one other thing which is also in Lean, and I see the same by the way also Kanban, is looking at flow in your organization. How does a product flow through your organization? Again, from the point that requests from your customers are coming in, requirements are becoming clear until the point in time that software is actually delivered to your customers. And what can you do to increase the flow, to make it faster and to make it easier to deliver products to your customers? There's a new thing that's been released last month, which is called the flow system. This is something which is based on the Toyota production system and the Toyota way, basically using that as a mindset and system thinking approach. But what the flow system adds to this is being focused on flow. It looks at how you can use complexity thinking to deal with problems. So how that can help you to really understand difficult problems, systemic problems in your organization, the networks which are there. Some of them are listed in the picture. So, for instance, Kinefin is something that can help to deal with complex systems, sense making. You can look at Scrum the Toyota way, which is a Scrum approach that Toyota has defined, which fits into the Toyota production system. Again, these are things that can help you to deal with complex problems, complex systems. The other thing in the flow system is distributed leadership. It explicitly stated that the leadership is going to be distributed. If you compare this to traditional organization where leadership is mostly top down, if you want to make agile work, if you want to make DevOps work, you want to make sure that you try to put leadership as low in the organization as possible, making it possible for teams to self-organize, making it possible for people in the teams to take decisions and to be responsible for those decisions. And again, this model is providing you with a lot of tools that can help you to deal with distributed leadership. The third pillar in this part is about team science. This is looking at how to build great teams. And again, for DevOps, you want to have end-to-end teams, teams which are able to develop the software, to test the software, to put it into production, and to actually see how customers are using it. And to make strong teams with such different capabilities in your team, different people in your team, team building is going to be an essential part to make this kind of thing work in your organization. Measurements. I think measurements are important to find out how good you are performing, and they can help you also to decide on where you want to improve if you got a good insight in your process. And the old statement also, what gets measured gets done. So when you're putting a measurement on something, when you're putting a target on something, this is going to make clear to people in your organization that this is important. If you look in DevOps, how you can use measurements in there, what I've seen is that value stream mapping can be a very useful tool. Again, it provides you insights into the flow from the starting point. It shows you the bottleneck, shows you how much time you are spending, whether that's production time or waiting time. And this measurement can actually tell you a lot about how to improve your flow, how to get things out of the door faster. Some of the other measurements you can do have to do with feature delivery time. How long does it take to deliver a feature in your organization? And failure rate, and that's also connected to defect slip too. And let's go a little bit deeper in that last one. If you look at measuring quality, a framework that I've used with some organizations is to explore where defects are made in your process. So which phase are defects entered into the system of your software production? Are those defects something that went wrong while you were specifying your product, when your user story? Do they have to do with your architecture and design work, or is it a coding failure that you made when you were implementing the code? And where do you find those defects? Is it something that you found them in review? Did you find them in early testing phases, late test phases? And then at the end, there will be defects that will be flowing to your customers, and these are actually the defects that your customers will perceive as the quality of your product. What you actually can do is to make these defects visible, so you can actually start tracking defects that are found in the various reviews and testing phases, tracking defects that you find that are found by your customer report or by your customers, and trace them back to where those defects came from, and look at how are defects going to, and where are you able to catch your defects as early as possible, because you want to optimize on that. So these kind of defect metrics can help you find defects as early as possible. There's also a lot of data that you can leverage from operation, data that is there from people who are using the system, and you can look at functions that are being used or not used. I'm hearing more and more from organizations that actually track the functions when they are deploying them to see if users are indeed using new functions that they have implemented in the system or not. And we even dare to roll back functions that are hardly ever used or not used by customers, because they don't want to have those features in their system. They might also do some A/B testing to see what kind of solutions are favored by the customers, what kind of solutions that they prefer best. If you look at using operational data, also don't forget your customer feedback. It may be more quantitative data than qualitative. It may be data that can tell you about how the system is being used, the problems that they have. But this is all very valuable information that you collect within operations and that you can bring back to the development people to see how to make a better system. The last word from the comms is sharing. And I was a bit surprised to see that there were no votes for the sharing part. So people are not seeing sharing as a problem. Well, what I see in organizations, that sharing can be challenging indeed. It can be challenging for people to collaborate, to be open, and to be transparent in there. So I'm a bit surprised to see such a low score on this. On the other hand, I'm also happy to see a low score, because this doesn't have to be a problem. So if people don't perceive this as a problem and are able to create transparency and openness in the organization, that's actually a great thing. Collaboration, a key thing if you look at things like DevOps today. You want to have people collaborating throughout the whole chain to make it work in there. And I think techniques that can help in there is to look at the bottlenecks that you have in your organization, the stuff that is limiting your collaboration in there. It might be related to your culture, it might be related to your organizational structure, but you want to find ways to identify those blockers and to work to get them out of the way. Ways to do this can, for instance, be by working together on problems. And if you have a problem, build up a team which is swarming and works together intensively to get those problems out of the way. Paired together, I've seen a lot of good results from people from development to people from operations are pairing, are working together to solve problems. The joint knowledge that you can have by two people working together, or maybe even more people when they start mobbing, can really give a boost to your products, can really improve the quality and produce much more value for the people that are using your system. To give an example for collaboration, there was an organization which actually called me in to improve collaboration within your organization. They had 3 departments, one where the developers were allocated, one department that was focusing on architecture and operating a system, and the third department where the project managers were based. This was a governmental organization. What they actually wanted to have is one quality team throughout the organization. And right now they had quality people in all 3 parts of the organization. And the first thing I actually did when I started working with this organization is that I asked to have an office in every department on different days in the week when I was working there. So I would be in one office on Monday, I would be in another department on Tuesday, and again in another department on Wednesday. On Thursday, I was actually alternating over the different departments depending on where I wanted to be that day. So occasionally I would actually be surprised for people where I would turn up. And being in a different office initially gave people the idea that I was only working for that department on Monday or only working that department for Tuesday because the other days I wasn't there. And I explained to them, like, I'm working for every department every day. But if you don't see me here, feel free to come over to the other department because I'm going to be there at my desk in that department. And I left a list in every department where I will be sitting on which day. And initially that was a bit scary for people, like walking over to another department. So they would wait a week until I was again in their department. But they soon found out that wasn't really helpful. So they decided to walk over. That was actually a great way already to make a connection between departments because people were moving physically between the different departments if they wanted to see me and if they wanted to discuss issues I was working on with them when I was in another department. We also used a kind of Kanban approach to start working on improvements. So I created a backlog on the stuff that we wanted to do. That was actually my project plan when I started working on improvements in this organization. And when we had this backlog, it made it a lot easier for us to prioritize and what to work on. And we also set ourselves a kind of work in progress limits. So we said we're only going to be working on 4 improvements maximum at a time. And we're going to make sure that if we want to work on another improvement, well, then we need to finish one first before we will start another one. We're not going to take too many improvements ongoing at the same time. We're just going to take those 4, and when we finish one, we're going to start with another one. The other thing we did in here was implement storytelling, and initially it was just people from the quality in the different departments telling their stories. After a couple of weeks, they actually asked me to invite their manager because they found out that some of the things that they were discussing, the stories that they were telling, would need their managers to help them solve the problems in there. So we actually invited the managers in there to listen to their stories and join in. And this actually went up until the management team. So after a couple of months, we were able to do these kind of storytelling sessions together with people from the management team to get a whole hands meeting to work on stuff together. I think the whole idea behind this is the scaling up part. So don't try to change everything at once. To start with improvement small and scale it up to involve more people into your improvement practice. One other thing on sharing is something that I did at a large organization I was working with. At that time we were doing process improvement work globally in the organization. And we decided to use golden rules for sharing. And these are a kind of open space, agile based golden rules where we said we want like to share stuff early and frequently. And we want to make sure that it's not individuals that are aiming for the results, but results will depend on the team. And basically somebody can start a task but that doesn't necessarily have to be the one who finishes it. So people can take over work from each other, and whoever is working on the task is the right people. This is something people might recognize from open space. Whoever are there, the right people. We said whoever is working on stuff, who thinks that they can contribute something to that, are the right people. And the final rule was more about improvement. Like we can critique stuff, but never criticize. It's okay to give critique to something, but you don't want to criticize all the stuff in there. Okay, I want to head to the second question right now, which is going to be on improvement. And I would like to hear from you, what's your favorite practice for doing continuous improvement? Would it be failure-based stuff? Would it be something that would look at the team as a way to improve in the organization? Lean-based approaches, using models, maturity-based model or other model, or would it mostly learning-based? So your votes, please.
Okay, Ben, can you see those results? Or would you like me to
I
read?
can't see them, so if you can tell them to me.
Of course. So the learning-based option came up on top with 50%. And then second was team approaches at 30%. And then a third place tie at 10% for failure-based and model-based.
Okay. So looking at this course and also looking at time, I'm gonna move on to the learning-based part since that's 50% of the improvement in there. And let's discuss that to see what's the stuff you can do in there to get even more value out of that one. So if I look at learning-based improvement, the things that I mentioned in there is things like coaching, mentoring, and katas. And I think this is techniques that a lot of organizations are using. If you look at Agile, and also if I look at how DevOps is implemented in the organization, certainly the coaching approach seems to be there a lot. A lot of organizations are also looking at ways to do mentoring or to do some kind of exercise in there. I think the other things is learning what goes well, things that are going well in the organization, how we can improve those stuff, and looking at communities and practice as a way to improve. So let's dive in the coaching part in there. And this is where I have maybe a somewhat different view, maybe for some people, challenging view if I look at how a lot of coaching is done in an organization. What I see with a lot of coaching is that it's again imposing stuff in organization. Coaches are brought in to change people's behavior and to more or less make the organization agile. That's what I see in the majority of organizations are using coaching right now. And if you really look at the definition, this is not coaching. This is change management. Again, this is stuff being imposed on people. And I think this is also the main reason why a lot of the change projects towards Agile and DevOps are failing in there. What I would like to see in an organization is not that much coaches brought in, but coaching having done in an organization. So people coaching each other, people helping each other on finding out how they are doing, helping each other to find different approaches to the way that they are solving the problems, finding better ways to do this, and creating a culture of coaching. And this culture has to be there at all levels. This is very important. If you really want coaching to succeed in your organization, I think it needs to be visible that also your managers are having coaches or are coaching each other on how to do improvement. That your management team is using coaching to improve on their way of working. You want to see this through all levels in the organization. And to develop this kind of coaching, this kind of practice, it's important to start learning from each other. So coaches should learn from each other to exchange coaching experiences. And there will be like a kind of community of practice of people that are doing coaching in the organization. Again, I'm saying people who are doing coaching, not coaches. The focus is much more on the coaches and the coachees. And I think the other thing would be there looking at, okay, just in time coaching and coaching people on the job with stuff that would help them right now, the stuff that they need right now to do a better job. It should be the coachee who's defining the agenda of coaching. not the top of the organization who's trying to roll out something over people, but it should be the people themselves who express a need for coaching and having in there. And the last part is a favorite one for me also. In a lot of organizations where I'm coaching, the main thing I do is be available in the organization and be there when people need me. But I'm going to leave it up to the people in the organization to approach me and to come to me with questions instead of trying to push them in a certain direction, telling them how to do the job. And once people feel safe enough to head over to a coach or to a mentor and to start asking for questions, improvements can really go a lot better. I think there's also a lot of exercises you can use retrospective if you look at creating a learning culture on your organization. One of the things would be to look at the core qualities that you have in your team and how you can use those core qualities to address any issues in there. The three things listed on this page are retrospective exercises. You can actually click on the exercises and then see a detailed description on how to do this in there. Another exercise that I've seen very valuable also is an exercise what's called futurespective. Imagining that your team is in the future, that they actually have been successful on delivering stuff to the customer, and then looking back on how they managed to do this. What was the things that they were doing as a team to get there? And what are the things that they need to get out of the way? So futurespective, getting rid of any barriers that you have right now and really thinking about how to do a best job can help you in there. A third approach would be solution focused. Look at strengths in your organization. So looking at the thing that you have in your organization, the thing that your team is already capable of, and how doing more of this stuff can help you to solve problems that your team is facing right now. These kind of approaches are based on engagement. These kind of approaches have the purpose to empower people in your organization. And where you want to go to is towards an organization that's enabled for continuous improvement, where there's a culture for learning, where that's people are expected to learn, whether that is from failure or whether that is from good stuff in there, but are expected to learn and to get better. You want to drive out any fear and blaming in there because those are the things that are mainly stopping learning in your organization. So you want to make sure that when you see this happening in your organization, you want to stop it and you want to drive it out of there. Again, this is not a new thing, but I don't see this happening in organization. And you want to make sure that you're doing improvement at all levels, being at the team level using retrospectives, being at the project or product level using overall retrospectives, being at your management teams on how they are working together as a team. You want to make sure that you are doing improvement at all levels in your organization. Looking at time, I think we need to wrap up the webinar right now so we can go to the question. The key takeaways that I want to give you from this webinar, I think DevOps, being DevOps practice, being DevOps cultures, being the way how you're using DevOps practice can enable organizations to deliver more values. But you need to develop an end-to-end view, and Lean can help you in there to make sure that things are flowing through your organization as fast as possible and that you're getting feedback in there. Transparency and openness are essential if you want to have a collaborative culture. So if people are not collaborating in your organization, when there's not enough collaboration, start looking at ways to make things visible there and be an example in being transparent yourself if you're helping an organization to become more collaborative. You can use retrospectives on a team level, but you can also use them to address systemic issues and use them to improve the DevOps culture and practice at an overall organizational level. And again, don't start imposing stuff on people. Make sure that you engage people and empower people and give them the means to do that. And some of the means that you can use for that are Agile self-assessments to see how they are doing and find ways to improve in there. And gamification as a way for people to work together to again explore their way of working and become better in how to do that. Okay, then I think we're ready for the questions part right now. So if you have any questions, please post them.
Okay, I do have two questions that I'll go ahead and read aloud, but if anyone else has questions, please submit them in the questions chat. The first question is, what happens when you get into process paralysis? What do you do when process becomes prohibitive to solving production outage?
Yeah, well, there's always a challenge between making sure that stuff gets delivered and looking at a way to improve processes in your organization, improve your way of working into your organization. And when there's really a fire burning, when stuff is not working well, and when your user not able to use your system, then the first thing that you should do is make sure to get that solved. And that's important because you want to make sure that the people can use your system. By the way, if you set up good DevOps practices and a good DevOps, you're able to do this, you're able to roll back if there's any problems in there. But if you don't have that yet, then you need to do it in a more traditional way and get the problem out of the way. The next thing, however, will be is to take time to learn from this, to look at what happened in there and to find a way to learn from the problems that you had, to look at how you solve these problems and think about things that you can do better in the future when a problem like this or several problems happen, and also explore what's been causing these problems in your organization. Look at the causes. They might also be causing other problems in your organization. A lot of things go back to some common causes which are causing a lot of problems in your organization. You want to find those causes and you want to address those causes to become better.
Okay, and then our second question is, what can we do when people are afraid to try something out because it might fail?
Yeah, this is a question which goes back to safety, and let's see if I can draw up a sheet on that because I actually got a sheet on safety in there. And basically, if people don't feel safe to bring up stuff in there, if you got the idea that if it's in a retrospective or in any other meeting, if people don't feel safe enough to talk about problems or to talk about the issues that they are facing, then that is the first stuff that you should be working on. If you don't get that out of the way, you're not going to be able to improve anything in your organization. You want to work on that safety. And there's a couple of things that you can use. One of the things you can do if you're in a retrospective is a safety check by just asking people anonymously to vote how safe they feel right now being in the team and being in that retrospective. And reflecting those scores back to the group to tell them on how the team is doing in there. The scores would be like a one, like I don't feel safe at all and I'd rather be somewhere else. If I could, I would walk out the meeting right away. Up to a five, like I feel safe to talk about anything. Just ask me what you want to talk about, and I can be completely open and honest about how things are going right now. If you ask people to score how they feel in the meeting anonymously, and you show these scores like how many ones, how many to back to the team, that can help you to get a discussion started. What I've seen is that actually, if there are people feeling unsafe and you show that you got a couple of people, and it doesn't matter who they are, just the fact that you got a couple of people that feel unsafe, if you show those scores and you get a discussion started, people who feel safe often can't even imagine there would be people in a room who don't feel safe at all. And a lot of occasions I've seen people just reflecting back like, okay, so what can I do to make this a more safe place? What can we do to make this a place where we can actually discuss stuff? Because we need to be open, we need to be honest if we want to improve as a team in there. There's also a couple of exercises that you can use in your retrospectives if you want to create the safety and also look at some of the things you want to improve in there. The one word exercise is a thing that you can use where people will basically state in one word how they feel about how things are going right now in the team. And you're just collecting those words and then starting a discussion on how things are going in there. Most of the time, people feel safe enough to express that in one word. And it's easy for people to say just one word than make long sentences in there. Certainly, if you have people in your reach who are introverts. For the extroverts, it can actually be a challenge to bring it back to one word. But the good thing is that by asking people to state in one word how they feel, you're making everybody equal in the room. You're making everybody act equal because they just have to use one word, no more, no less. A similar thing happens if you use a constellation exercise in your retrospective, where you're asking people not to talk, but just to move based on a couple of questions that you're asking there. This is again making people equal. People can move without having to say something. And once they've moved and taken position in the room, that's where you can start a discussion in there. So that's the kind of stuff that you can use to create psychological safety.
Okay, so that was our final question. And with that, I would like to thank Ben Linders for a phenomenal presentation. And I would also like to thank Logi Analytics for providing the audience with a great webinar. Lastly, thank you to everyone who attended today. We hope you learned something new that will help you in your developer career. Have a great day.